Every few years, a talent show delivers a moment that audiences never forget. And in June 2018, America's Got Talent produced exactly that. A 13-year-old girl from a small town in England stepped onto the stage and left the judges speechless the moment she opened her mouth to sing. Her name was Courtney Hadwin, and within days she had become a global sensation. Yet the same fame that made her would eventually turn into something far more complicated. Her audition aired on June 12, 2018. Courtney was 13, and she walked out looking every bit as nervous and unsure as any teenager might. Before she even began, she admitted to the judges that she struggled badly with stage fright, and Melby had to coax her just to get her talking. But once she launched into Otis Redding's Hard to Handle, the shy, timid girl vanished completely. Her voice turned powerful, her stage presence electric, and her movements unlike anything the judges had seen from someone her age. She dropped to her knees mid-performance, prompting Simon Cowell to mutter an astonished curse under his breath, while Howie Mandel compared her instantly to Janis Joplin. By the time the song ended, the crowd was on its feet, and Mandel wasted no time hitting the golden buzzer, sending her directly to the live shows. He later said he'd never been more excited, comparing her to previous golden buzzer recipients who had gone on to become frontrunners, including a young singer named Grace VanderWaal, who had won a prior season. The audition drew more than 11 million live television viewers, but its true reach came online, with a clip raised past 100 million views within a week and eventually crossed 250 million. Overnight, Courtney went from an anonymous English schoolgirl to an international phenomenon. She kept up the momentum throughout the competition, earning standing ovations from all 4 judges for a James Brown cover in the quarterfinals, and delivering a wild, scream-laced rendition of Steppenwolf's Born to be Wild in the semifinals that again had Mandel predicting she'd take the whole competition. Cowell described her as raw, messy, and thrilling, recalling how she'd shaken like a leaf before her first audition only to transform into something else entirely once the music started. Heidi Klum praised her for bringing gritty rock energy to a stage dominated by pop, though Melby was a lone judge to gently note nerves creeping into her performance. None of it stopped the audience from voting her into the finale. There, she performed alongside the band The Struts and closed with a cover of Janis Joplin's Piece of My Heart. Every signal pointed toward her taking home the $1 million prize. The judges' praise all season, the audience's votes, and the astronomical view counts. Instead, when the results came in, Courtney placed 6th. The win went to magician Shin Lim. Witnesses at the Dolby Theater described audible gasps rippling through the crowd, and fans flooded social media calling the outcome absurd, stunned that the presumed favorite from week 1 hadn't even cracked the top 5. The girl who'd been tipped to win from her very first audition went home empty-handed. But the elimination, as jarring as it was, turned out to be only the beginning of a much harder chapter. Record deals arrived fast. Simon Cowell, who had once likened her to a lion on stage, brought her into a partnership with Arista Records, and the signing was announced that December, just months after the finale. Courtney was 14 at the time and spoke about feeling lucky and excited to join the label. Cowell called her an amazing artist and said he'd never forget her original audition. For a while, it looked like the beginning of exactly the career everyone had predicted. Then, shortly before her 16th birthday, it all collapsed. Both labels involved underwent major structural upheaval, with one winding down operations entirely, and Courtney was left without the team or support that had made the deal appealing in the first place. She later said the fallout made everything harder, that she felt pressure to prove herself over and over, and that it left her in a tougher spot than she'd been before the show ever aired. Rather than bouncing back quickly, she fell into a genuine creative identity crisis. After the finale, she'd been placed in songwriting camps with producers who, by her own account, didn't understand her sound at all. She was handed songs that felt like generic pop, nothing like the soul and blues she'd grown up loving. Her musical identity had been shaped by black and white YouTube clips of James Brown, Tina Turner, Etta James, and Aretha Franklin, and she pinpointed a specific moment, watching Brown perform I Got You, I Feel Good, as the instant she knew what she wanted her music to sound like. But the industry pushed her towards something more modern and market-friendly, and in doing so nearly stripped away what made her stand out in the first place. Learning to make soul and blues feel current without sounding dated became a years-long struggle, one she navigated largely in rooms full of writers who didn't know her. The turning point came when she connected with producer Kevin Bowe, who had previously worked with artists like Etta James and Joe Cocker. He understood the tradition she came from, and for the first time she was invited to genuinely co-write, rather than simply accept whatever session writers produced. It required her to open up in ways she hadn't before, and though she said songwriting never came naturally to her, it eventually became something she couldn't imagine living without. She worked on her debut album for years, starting around age 15, and finally released Little Miss Jagged in September 2025, a project shaped by nearly a decade of setbacks and rediscovery. While she worked toward that release, the internet turned on her in a different way. Old footage surfaced of her competing on The Voice Kids UK in 2017, where she'd finished in the top 6, and viewers began comparing her confident performances there to the trembling, stage-frightened girl from her America's Got Talent audition. Trolls accused her of faking the nerves for dramatic effect, and the accusation spread rapidly online. Even though nothing about her prior competition experience broke any rules and she'd never tried to hide it, her grandfather, Tom Story, defended her publicly, explaining that the family had always believed American audiences would connect with her energy more than British ones would, which is part of why she chose America's Got Talent over Britain's Got Talent. He was right about the reception, but no one anticipated the backlash that followed. At just 14, Courtney responded to the criticism with striking composure, saying she'd learned to tune out negativity and focus on the people who supported her. Still, the fake accusations followed her for years, compounded by bullying from classmates back home in County Durham who mocked her voice, even as her parents had feared exactly this kind of exposure. Between roughly 2019 and 2022, Courtney largely disappeared from public view, not in the way artists take a planned break, but in a more complete sense as the label collapsed and stalled songwriting efforts left her without direction. She's since described that stretch candidly, admitting to constant pressure to prove she was more than the girl from the show, and to essentially growing up under public scrutiny instead of experiencing anything resembling a normal adolescence. Those years weren't empty, though. She spent them writing, using the process as an emotional outlet, since she'd never been especially comfortable talking about her feelings directly. Now in her early 20s, she looks back on being thrown into fame at 13 as genuinely difficult, acknowledging both how much she's grateful for and how much of a burden it was to grow up under constant observation. That tension between gratitude and hardship runs through the album itself. One standout track, You Only Love Me When I Lie, addresses the frustration of people refusing to let go of the image they formed of her as a child. She said the song came from real frustration, written after she reached out to Bo insisting she needed to get it down, and she considers it the rawest, most soul-rooted track she's made. The accompanying video deliberately portrayed her as a woman rather than a child, a visual statement that she'd moved on from the persona fans had frozen her in. She's also spoken about industry pushback on other songs, including one called 16, originally written at that age and dismissed at the time as not good enough, which she later revisited and rewrote once she was independent. Her path to that independence started long before television. As a child, she buskied on streets across the Northeast, in York, and in London just to pay for her own singing lessons, handing some of the money to her father for gas to reach her performance spots. Even then, she faced resentment from other buskers unhappy about losing their usual crowds and best corners to an 11-year-old. Cruelty continued when she appeared on The Voice Kids UK, where commenters dismissed her as a shouter rather than a singer. Reflecting on all of it in a 2025 interview, she said her younger self would be shocked by how much she's changed and how much courage she's built, admitting that hate comments used to hurt more than she ever let on, sometimes making her question whether she wanted any part of public life at all. Now, she says she cares far less what people think, writing primarily for herself and treating any connection with listeners as a bonus rather than the point. That hard-won confidence was tested again in June 2025, a month after her album dropped, when she performed at Festival Vila in Portugal wearing an outfit that broke sharply from her earlier, more modest image: a cropped shirt, tie, fishnet stockings, and very short bottoms. It went viral almost instantly, but for the wrong reasons. Within a day, she received hundreds of mocking messages accusing her of faking authenticity for attention, echoing the same fake narrative that had trailed her since 2018. The backlash proved, in a painful way, exactly the point her album had been making. Audiences wanted her frozen, as the innocent child they remembered, and the moment she showed them who she'd actually become, many turned against her. Despite that, Courtney describes Little Miss Jagged as the first time she's had real creative control, a project that functioned as diary and therapy at once, chronicling everything she'd lived through since 13. She was 20 when she finished writing it after nearly 6 years of work, and 21 when it finally reached listeners. Even with all the resistance she's faced, the album stands as a woman refusing to stay confined to the box the world built for her at 13.